Good evening, everybody, and a very warm welcome to tonight's webinar. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by OAE violinist Kinga Ujszaszi tonight, who will be presenting on communication and music and communication within music. As ever, you are welcome to contribute by sending in comments and questions using the chat functionality, which is the button in the middle at the bottom of your screen. Hello, Kinga. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. I think you've got a PowerPoint that you're going to share with us, so I will let you take it away.
Hi, Marina. Hi, everyone. I'm just going to quickly try to share my screen. Bear with me for 1 second. And I'm going to make this work. Of course, it's not going very well. And there it should be.
There we go.
Perfect. Yes. And communication through music and communication with music, that's what I'm going to be talking about tonight. And I'm going to touch on a subject, what's not written in the music, how does us communicate. When I was thinking about this topic, I found this really cute little quote from The Little Prince, which I absolutely love. If you never read it, please read it. It's just fantastic. Which, what is essential is invisible to the eye. And that's very much true to music as well. So I'm going to start the presentation today by reading out a little quote. It's a description of a lute performance, a private little lute performance which took place in Venice in the 16th century. And I think it's just sums up completely beautifully what a good performance is and how it should be. And we're going to take it away from there. So, the tables being cleared, he chose one, and as if tuning his strings, sat on the end of the table seeking out a fantasia. He had barely disturbed the air with 3 strummed chords when he interrupted conversation which had started among the guests. Having constrained them to face him, he continues with such ravishing skill that little by little, making the strings languish under his fingers in his sublime way, he transported all those who were listening into so pleasurable melancholy that they remained deprived of all senses save that of hearing, as if the spirit, having abandoned all the seats of the senses, had retired to the ears in order to enjoy the more at its ease so ravishing harmony. And I believe that we would be there still, had he not himself, I not know how, changing his style of playing with a gentle force, returned the spirit and the senses to the place from which we had stolen them, not without leaving as much astonishment in each of us as if we had been elevated by an ecstatic transport of some divine frenzy. I think that's a really beautiful description of probably an astounding performance. Like a lutenist just sits down in the crowd and just starts plucking away. That happens a lot actually in real life nowadays as well. They just pluck away and they just suddenly everyone just has to listen what they're doing. And it's usually, yeah, they love improvising a little fantasia. It's just gorgeous thing. So music was always regarded to have enormous power over humans. Mythical figures such as Orpheus were seen to demonstrate amazing powers and persuade rocks and trees, animals to do whatever they wanted to do. Just the other picture here is from the Magic Flute, where Tamino's flute and Papageno's pan flute and glockenspiel would totally enchant the listeners, and they would get through all the challenges with the help of music and their instruments. They could face beasts. They made them, be really tame instead of attacking them. And that's quite an amazing power to give to music. Music was also said to have healing powers. For example, the music of the Tarantella dance allegedly cured the bite of the similarly named spider. Well, that's clear that music has a lot of powers and influence on human psyche. But of course, I wouldn't suggest to put on a Spotify playlist when you get bitten by a spider. I think it's better to just go to the doctor and leave it to science rather than music nowadays. I think we have the option. So songs were also used to lighten the strain of labor. Like, for example, in the galleys, the rowers of the galleys would try to, synchronize their movements with to the beats of drums and music. And like women weaving, they would have like a song to keep the rhythm going. These are all really powerful elements. Throughout the centuries, everyone thought that music has incredible part in everyone's life, and they show a lot of power on the human emotions. There are a couple of more quotes I would read out. So Dryden said, "What passion cannot music raise and quell?" Or there's another one. Scheibe writes that musicians' role is to inflame and the philosopher's is to enlighten. So I guess musicians shouldn't try to enlighten, but you know, we can try. Geminiani, who was an excellent violinist and really virtuoso, he said that audience should be so much at the performance disposal that they may stamp whatever impression on the mind they want. That's an amazing power to have as a performer, or to be expected to have. Quantz, the famous flutist from the Baroque era as well, the purpose of music is to constantly arouse and still the passions. This must never be forgotten. So I was wondering, what is this immense power we're supposed to be dealing with here? What is music? And music is basically just arranging sounds in time, and it's a composition which main elements is melody, harmony, rhythm. Not much more to it if we really try to break it down into scientific terms. But it is still one of the cultural universal aspects of all human societies. Wherever we go on the globe, we will find different musical instruments and different music, and there is no human society without any of those. We find really funky instruments where we look. Music is a very profound way to express loads of things and to communicate. Well, communication can be very basic and functional as well. For example, there are these African villages where they would have a lot of codes, drum codes. And if you're out of the village and you hear the drumming coming from the village and you know what each drum signal means, you know if you have to run back to the village because there is a fire, or you would have a different drum call if an enemy is attacking the village, or if they call you for dinner. You would get that from the communication. Other very good example for functional communication with music is trumpet calls in battles. It was used as a signaling instrument for a very, very long time, because the sound of it just pierces and it carries very far away above the all the battlefield. So you would have to know obviously what each call means, but you would get all the information you need to know on the battlefield, charge or retreat, or dismount or mount. Like, there is this guy who I found he recorded 3 CDs with the trumpet calls. So you kind of really need to know a lot of trumpet calls and to know what they mean to not get it wrong in a situation, I guess.
That could go very badly wrong.
It can go really badly, yes. If you're like, oh no, this way, that way. Which way are you going? I thought this means that. Yes. But so yeah, 3 CDs were that's a lot of. I wouldn't take the responsibility for that, I think, on the battlefield. Well, obviously that also means that if you're trying to communicate to someone, there needs to be someone who you communicate to and who understands what you're trying to say. So you need an audience. And whoa, we have an audience. And this is obviously, nowadays it's a little bit tricky. Because actually in the last year, I think we realized, we always knew that the audience has a huge power and amazing power, and we really need the audience to be there. And in this last year, trying to create, performances without an audience, you really do notice the huge difference that the lack of real human beings communicating with their energy, being in the same space as you. Well, you're lucky if you have the opportunity to perform for a camera nowadays, and you're even more lucky if there's someone actually holding the camera for you. So there is actually someone in the room with you, and you do feel the energy and what moves between 2 or 3, 4 human beings. It's absolutely incredible, the power. And so
before this pandemic, obviously you were aware of the audience's power, but were you consciously aware of different audiences and different energies in different concerts?
Absolutely.
Or you took it for granted, and only looking back now, do you realize quite the impact, or at the time you would?
No, I think as a performer, you're always aware of the audience and the different types of audience as well, because it's always a conversation. You always have a feeling what the audience is feeling, or what sort of energy as a crowd they have. So there is obviously, as the performer's job, as in within the communication, that you need to entertain the audience, or you need to charm them, or amuse, or move, or express things to them. And if they don't react, you definitely notice that. Well, and you give enjoyment, you try your best, and you try to, what you receive back is usually, hopefully, it's some kind of a clap at the end, some kind of admiration, maybe, hopefully, who knows. So the ancient orators, actually, they did believe that only a large audience will do. And it's really necessary to fire up the delivery, to have the crowd there. And they thought that the speakers cannot work properly if they don't hear the audience saying, "Hear, hear," and like all sorts of clapping. So that's what that's what they were used to, and they thought that that's the only way to communicate anything, if you get something in return. And of course this sort of changed over the times, because as music, like if you're talking about sort of music in the Baroque and the classical era, it moved inside, obviously, the music, and it moved into smaller settings, more intimate, like, for example, chamber music. But then again, if you play chamber music for just a few people, it's a very different energy and very different communication. I need to do to play to just, let's say, 30, 40, 50 people in a small room, or just maybe 3. Or if I'm in a large hall and there is like 1,000 people in the audience, or 2,000 people, you do behave very differently, and you get back very different things as well. And of course, that's my job to notice if the audience is actually reacting on what I'm doing. And if I'm not reacting on that, I'm not a very good performer, actually, I think. And of course, the audience has a lot of responsibility as well, I think, because they have sort of usually, without knowing, there is a slight prejudice before the performance is taking place, that if they know the performer, or if the performer is very famous, they with their positive sort of, or if it's a positive sort of expectation, that can influence how they experience the performance as well. Of course, there are the performances when whatever you do, or you think whatever you do, the audience is just not reacting, and you think you have a bad crowd. I mean, you do things so very often, like you come off at like half, like at the interval, and it's like, oh my God, this crowd is really hard. I can't do anything. But it probably is the performance fault, that something is not quite right between the giving and taking between the audience and the performer. And sometimes the audience just remains completely unmoved, and then maybe you didn't adjust your way of talking to them, or there is very occasionally when they are really just not getting it. But probably there will be one person at the back of the hall, even then, who got a lot of things out of the performance. You just don't feel that one person at the back. But if you're really open to what's happening in the room around you, you do feel the energy and what you get back. So it's very important to hold the attention of the audience, obviously, and to capture and that they want to listen to me, and they want to be part of the performance. So there was this Italian violinist who came to London, as they all did, in the 18th century. And of course, this Italian man just appears and plays the violin like the god. And all of London was just absolutely flabbergasted, like, oh my God, who's this guy? And this guy was Nicola Matteis. Like, I can sort of imagine him like a proper Italian, very loud, and just plays to be a show-off, I think. And there is this description that he held the company by the ears with the force and variety for more than an hour together, and that there was scarce a whisper in the room, though filled with company. So I think in this one, that variety that's not the only way, but it is very important to have a variety of different pieces, different moods within the piece to create variety, to keep the audience engaged. So, of course, what do I want to communicate actually as a performer? Well, probably a lot of things. There are loads of pieces which sort of mimic sounds of birds, or it can tell a story, or it's about expressing emotions. And the one type when they express emotions that was considered by most Baroque and classical composers as the most worthy cause. Like by that time, mimicking a bird or a frog or any sort of characters was sort of considered as a cheap trick. Like anyone can do that. That's not a big deal. I know how as a nightingale sounds. We're not going to do that. So it was really important back then that, and still now, that we engage the emotions and the passions, as they used to call them. And that was regarded the highest purpose of music, to express and evoke emotions in the audience. Well, we're trying, obviously, to deal with all the emotions of what the composer might have thought to put into the music. I think that's the starting point. But of course, if you have a performer, then you will have the performer's opinion on the music or what they feel about the music. It's impossible not to communicate that. Then I also, as a performer, I would probably want to communicate a little bit of me, that my identity and why am I different from anyone else who could be playing that music, what I have acted. That's a little bit of eccentricity there, but we all have violins, we all have that, I think, to some extent, let's face it. And so I also want to probably communicate, maybe I don't want to, but I will communicate how I'm feeling right now. Because if your body is full of emotions, and it's almost impossible to switch that off. It's very interesting. The other day I played some Bach on a Zoom sort of session to a few people. And actually I haven't played solo Bach in front of people for a long time. I haven't played in front of people for a long time, actually. So I was, even within my own bedroom, I was relatively nervous to play. And, I had this whole thing about this lovely movement, what I think the music is about and what I want to communicate. And I played. And then after that, someone said that, wow, I've never heard that effect in this music before. And it was really amazing and unique. And it's like, what did you think you were hearing? And she said it was a lot of anguish in there and a lot of sort of questioning and like, okay, that was me on the spot rather than what I was imagining about the music. So it's sort of inadvertently comes out what you not necessarily want to be. So that's why it's really important, I think, for us performers to sort of learn how to control these emotions and what is your little toolbox you have with you if you want certain things to come across in music.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask, because a moment ago when you were talking about, how it's the performer's responsibility to make adjustments to the energy in the room, and if the audience aren't engaging, then it might be up to the performer to change that. Do you have adjustments that you consciously use, or do you have any idea of what you might do on a stage if something isn't working?
Well, like, of course, sort of, if you're trying something and it's not working, then well, my cheap trick is usually to try to be. It depends, but on the piece, obviously not with everything. But maybe I try to be very sort of not funny, but unexpected. So that's always a trick to try to get attention. And then when you have the attention, then you can go into more subtle things. So if you do something really unexpected, then usually that was like, what just happened? Then you get that focus, and then you can try to tune into that. That's a very cheap trick, but it can work. Sometimes it doesn't, of course.
We've got a first question on the chat panel, which actually ties into what we were just talking about. How does a group of players hone all their individual emotions when playing a piece, or is that what the conductor is for?
Well, yeah, very good question. So it depends. Obviously, if you have a conductor on stage with you, it's unpolite not to do what the conductor is asking you to do. And when you don't have a conductor there, then you have a group of individuals and very intelligent musicians who will obviously have someone who is taking the reins, sort of, and have the main say or thing what's going to happen. But also between musicians, there's a lot of communication can go on. Of course, as a group, if you're playing in a group, the group usually has a sort of identity as well. And when you play with certain groups, you do know what you're expected to do in that setting, and you do fit in with your playing style. So if I play with the OAE, I play slightly differently from when I play with English concert, or if I'm playing solo. You kind of shift it because you know what the sound of that group is, or you know what the style is, and actually, if you're aware, and it's quite easy to be aware, that's also your job, then you know how to change, how to adjust to the group setting as well. But also on stage, when you are playing chamber music with your colleagues and friends, for me that's the most fascinating thing ever, because you can just propose a musical idea and see if anyone takes that up, and if they are willing to sort of improvise on stage with you or not, if they're going to follow it, what you sort of saying, and then sometimes you just have to let it go. You thought, oh, that was a brilliant idea. Oh, no one did it. Fine, okay, I'm not going to insist on it. But that happens. It does happen.
Spontaneously in the middle of a performance.
Yes, wow. I have a duo partner who, what we usually do as preparing for a performance, that we don't actually fix anything. On rehearsal, we try to play a piece 15 different ways, completely differently, and we try out all the spectrum where you can go, and then we just leave it open. And we know that there are all these different elements to it, and all the different ways it is possible to come out from one situation. And it just happens on stage, whatever happens. And then obviously that's the most interesting thing, that you always have to be tuned into the other and listen what they're doing. And it's always a gamble, of course. And some people do think that's too dangerous to do that on stage. But that just, for me, that keeps it alive. And that's like live communication, and that's happening right in front of the audience's eyes. And that's, I don't know, for me, that's absolutely fantastic when that can happen. And of course, it's not always possible to rely on that sort of communication. And of course, it depends on the size of the group. It depends how well you know each other, and how much you trust each other on stage as well, of course.
We've got a few more questions coming in.
Go on.
So what is the role of silence?
That's my favorite thing. Absolutely favorite. I love silence. Probably you can't tell it right now, but silence is the most powerful. Well, I probably say to everything that's the most powerful tool you have. But silence is magic. Where you put it, how long you hold it for, and without silence, there is no music, of course. And if silence has this effect that, like, if you put it in the middle of the piece, you can start something completely new, and you can start from a completely new feeling, a new effect. And because you had the silence, you usually have the attention as well. And silence is, you can do this much, and that's just called articulation, and you can do that much and that much. And it's, I don't know, I absolutely love playing with silence and time within music. That's one of my favorite things, the time and rubato, and how you can bend time into the space continuum. It's magical. Yeah.
And going back to your use of time and silence, another question here is that if you're always thinking in original and kind of improvisatory terms when you're performing, what does that mean for your recordings? How do you choose which recording take? Because there's a comment here that your recordings sound fresh and improvisatory.
Thanks. Well, that's the trick. That's the difficult bit, because if you know that there are so many ways you can do this music, and you love experimenting with it, then of course putting down a recording is hell on earth. And especially if you with continuo players, if they because continuo playing and the bass realizations in Baroque music, it's not written in the music, and that's also left for imagination and improvisation. And with continuo, you can do so much. And if the continuo player is very imaginative and inventive, then in the editing box you do get problems. And you just kind of you do of course decide before the recording that what you're gonna roughly do, but because you played around with it so much, there is the possibility to keep it quite fresh and improvised. And in my recordings I've done, especially this obviously the solo ones, that the improvisation is very often actually quite real. And in the CD it's not like agreed improvisation. There is a lot to be left for the moment, and if you know your partners you're working with, then there is that possibility. And sometimes in the editing is like we played 5 different versions and like, oh my god, I don't even know. But then you have to kind of patch it in how it fits within the whole structure of the music and find that one. It's very interesting work actually being in the editing end of that. And I don't envy the sound engineers sometimes for that. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you. No more questions for the moment, so do continue.
Sure. Okay. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and Kiki, if you could put in that first music for us. And so basically what so that will be just a little bit of a taster. What is music scientifically? If we say music is pitch and rhythm and all these things, and so we can put in into any kind of logarithm in a computer, and that's what we're gonna have, taking away all the expressions. Can we have just like 10 seconds? I don't think we can stand it for longer. I think that's roughly enough. So yeah, that's sort of music without any performer being in the middle. That's just purely the measurable quantities which we can put into a computer. So that was Bach. Can you tell? That was actually Bach. So, and I can't believe that there are websites dedicated to Bach, all of Bach's music in MIDI form, just a computerized version of it. Who would spend so much time with it? I think it's fascinating. But in that one, we don't have any emotions. It's nothing is there. All the things which make music, or what emotions you would be expressing, that's all missing from that, because it's just rhythm, precise, and pitch. And is this a good thing? I wonder. So we need to put in our emotions in there. I'm going to share my screen again. I think, how do I do this? Kiki, can you stop sharing your sound, please? Thank you. And then I get back into my share. So what we would like to communicate emotions and passions. Yeah. And I have this slide with historical acting, sort of faces, and how they would convey emotions. and all the practices and all the measurements, how you can express anger and how you can express sadness and happiness. There are loads of pictures, and they are fantastic, but I kind of had to choose just sort of a couple of them to demonstrate, because that's not the main thing I would like to talk about. But emotions are felt in the body. It's in different parts of your body, and you are kind of, when you try to convey emotions to the performers, you have to feel these emotions to be able to really express them. And so you really need to know all of these things. Where do you feel happiness? How do you feel happiness? How you can make yourself feel happiness if you are going on stage and you're really not feeling happy? How do you make yourself look confident? And there are these experiments that, of course, feelings are generating hormones in your body. And for example, the easiest one, like when you're feeling happy because you just had a nice cuddle with your dog, or you're playing with your cat, you've just been for a run and you're feeling absolutely ecstatic, then that's usually endorphin in your body, and you feel that in your body and it makes you smile. And so these neuropaths in your brain and your body, there's all connected, that smiling, endorphins, and feeling happy. So, but you can kind of influence that if you really want to. If you're not feeling happy but you want to, you can make yourself smile, and that will sort of start these neuropaths sort of into action. They fire into action, and you start feeling happy, and the endorphins will start being created in your body. So you kind of need to be aware of these sort of connections. How do you generate sadness in yourself? And I found this amazing thing, which is the emotion wheel, which is, of course, this is not specifically made for music and performance. But it's a wonderful tool. There are so many on the internet. I chose this because it had pretty colors. But there are so many emotions which some people just can't find the right word for it. This tool is to help to find what you're actually feeling. But for music, I find this actually quite useful, that, you know, it's not enough to say that something is happy music or sad music. If I just look at this chart, happy can be so many things. It can be cheeky, it can be joyful. That I would play that completely differently. Or it could be sensitive or intimate. Like if I were trying to express all these different feelings within the happy music, I use tools like, for the intimate, I try to play quietly, for example, or much quieter, or with different tone I try to use. If I'm cheeky, I will use probably quite different articulation, like long. I will choose to mix up long and short notes, probably. If it's joyful, I will have probably quite a healthy sound, and maybe the tempo won't be as fast if I want to do something cheeky. A couple of weeks ago, well, let's face it, it was months ago by now, we planned a little performance, and I kind of put together the music. And for the end, I chose a music which I really liked. And then we got to the sort of rehearsal, and we played it through, and it just really didn't fit the affect of the music, how I wanted to play it. And then we said, like, oh, this is not going to work for the end. And then, but we didn't have time to sort of find a different music, print it, rehearse, learn it. So it's like, well, we just have to work with whatever we've got. So I just need to change the affect, what I think this music should be about. So instead of being very happy, I just had to decide, has to feel like the ending of a performance. So what I did was slowing down the music, like the tempo a little bit, do different dynamics. And it could be sort of, so we had to turn this music into a calming ending for something instead of something really excited. And of course, the music usually tells you what it wants to do, but still you have quite a wide range. And if you're looking at this emotion wheel, sort of, you can decide from if you want to shift something to another place, and then if you have the toolbox, you can have that.
We've got a question here about playing on original instruments, particularly gut strings. Do they limit or expand the ways in which you feel that you can express emotions through your playing?
I would say definitely expand. Definitely. That's why I'm playing Baroque music and gut strings. I I think the gut string has so much power to express a lot of things, and actually the quality of the sound when it's scratchy, that's actually, I find that that's also a tool, that's an effect you can use, that actually we are allowed to say, we are allowed to play something ugly, because that's an effect. It doesn't always have to be beautiful. And because the gut string actually likes being sort of tortured a little bit sometimes, you really have that ability to create something which is artfully ugly. And I just love having that opportunity. And the colors I find in gut strings, it's, for me personally, I'm pretty sure loads of people would disagree with me, but there is so much variety. And of course, it depends what string you put on what violin. Of course, that's the usual. But still, within the range, how much the contact you have, the sound changes immensely. I think way more than on metal strings. Yeah.
Amazing.
Right. Okay. So there is some communication. Maybe I'm a little bit behind my sort of schedule, but I would like to talk about a little bit maybe of facial expressions. I find that very interesting thing. Sort of when we are students, we are often told, don't put anything on your face, stop it, and just be motionless, because everything you express, you have to express through music. And because you're a musician, you just put a blank face on it and then don't move it and play. And so that actually creates a lot of anxiety. And I think a lot of people have problem stopping. And then once they manage to stop what comes through their face, once they realize it's actually not a bad thing to have a living face on a performance, then it's really difficult for them to start it again. Because it feels very vulnerable to really express facial expressions, how you feel, what you play on the stage. And I think facial expression and body language is one of the most important part of communication, almost more important than verbal communication, I think. And I don't try, of course, I'm not putting on, when I'm playing, I'm not consciously playing with my face. Often I try to put on a little bit of a smile, especially if it's something very difficult, so no one knows that I'm struggling. That's the only sort of forced thing I sometimes try to put on my face. But of course, when you have, yeah, it's like, but of course, there is sometimes the disadvantage that you played something wrong or you didn't like it and you just like do something, and obviously the audience wouldn't necessarily notice that you did something wrong, but you did draw the attention to that because like, I really shouldn't have done that. That's of course a disadvantage. But I think having a body language on stage as well, that's also a human connection to the audience. And if I turn to them, I invite them to be part of the performance. And if I turn to my colleagues or certain members of the orchestra or a group, then it's probably quite obvious that I'm communicating directly to them or with them, or I have something which we want to play together at the moment, or even with like facial expressions, where you often like smile at someone, yeah, we did that, yeah, or you're like, it's coming up. Or, you know, there is a lot you communicate on stage with your colleagues, like sometimes even like, that's a bit slow, or I don't know. And of course, if you want to sort of change the dynamics, and if you sort of go a little bit step back from the music stand, and then, you know, that's quite an obvious sort of signal that you want to play something quieter. Or if you want to play sort of more loud and confident, then you step a step closer, you make yourself a little bit taller somehow, magically.
I think audiences love seeing that. It's often a comment that we get about the OAE, and somebody's commented in the panel here that actually it's one of the great things about the OAE is that we see you all smile and grin, and not so often grimacing, but you know, there's such a team spirit because we can all actually visually see those communications going on between you, which I don't think you see in all orchestras by a long time.
No, you don't. And I think that's quite a specialty, sort of in early music especially, I think, that you're allowed to, and you encouraged to have feel all these things, what's happening, and rather than just being one of a 120-piece orchestra and just have to fit in and blend in. I think there is so much more scope for being in like individuals. Like I would like to show two scores, I think, because that actually tells a lot about how music and the relation to music and composers and performer changed over the times. Of course, it's kind of correlates to the printing technique as well, how it evolved. So in the 16th, 17th century, you get music like that.
So
There is not much information on that. There is rhythm and pitch, and sometimes even the rhythm is really hard to crack as well. You might have to have a couple of go at that. There is no information about what instrument the continuo, or sometimes there is no information what continuo instrument you should be playing with. There is no phrasing, there is no dynamics. So you get quite a lot of range and free rein to do something with this music. Obviously, back at the time, everyone would have agreed what anything means or what are the traditions, how you usually play certain things. But still, there is a lot which is not there. How you play with time, where you put the silences a little bit. And then by, printing technique evolved a lot. People were able to put all the information they wanted to put in the score. And therefore, composers decided, yes, I'm going to put in everything I can. So I tell the performer exactly what I want to hear. And then you get this. Which is, I mean, it would take me about 2 months just to get through the first bar to understand what's happening there. Because the composer here really specifies every single dynamic. And every single note has some extra information, maybe 2 or 3 little things. And then if I really want to interpret, or if I really want to play what the composer is asking me to play, I won't have headspace to play anything which I think might be missing, because there is nothing missing. That is basically a set of instructions, and I personally, of course, there are loads of people love contemporary music. I love it as well. I just don't like to play it because it doesn't leave me as a performer much sort of freedom, which I absolutely love about playing Baroque music. That you have variations, you have ornaments you can use. You're not being told every single thing like in a school class what to do, and. Yeah, so I would rather start from this kind of score. Yeah.
It's just an interesting question about facial expressions and conductors, and how important is the conductor's facial expression for the orchestra, or an orchestra?
I think it is quite important, unless they are being rude, because sometimes you see that some conductors do like to roll their eyes at you, and that's just not encouraging at all. That you feel like you're constantly doing something wrong. But other than that, it's fantastic to see certain conductors. I'm sure people would have seen those video recording of Bernstein conducting, who basically can just like conduct or convey something with like just a flick of an eyebrow. And it's fascinating how someone's face can be so alive and expressive. And it's amazing to be able to react on those. It is very important if it's expressive, I think. Not everyone has that ability, but if they have, that's just fascinating. It's wonderful. Yeah.
We've only, believe it or not, we've only got a couple of minutes left, and I know that you had lots more that you wanted to say, so I just wondered if there was anything you wanted to conclude with that you wanted to make.
Well, I would be just saying that, I was kind of planning to sort of play a little bit and demonstrate certain things, which obviously we don't really have time for, which is a shame, but whatever. That's my fault that I talk too much. So I would have demonstrated a little bit about the use of ornaments and how to take time and how to find effects in the music, and what sort of how do you find certain emotions, and how you have the ability to. And I was going to show a little bit of the toolbox, how I use dynamics and rubato and a little bit of that. But unfortunately, we don't have time for that. I'm sorry.
Well, we've got a request for episode 2, so you'll just have to come back and do another.
Episode 2, yeah. Phantom Menace, yeah. And I think other than that, I think it's just what takeaway I would like to give probably to everyone is just enjoy the music and find the emotions, and when you go to a performance, go with an open heart and see where it takes you, because only live performances you have that ability to really experience all those affects and emotions which are flying around. And of course, as an audience member, you have that ability as well to communicate it back, and that's for us the most wonderful thing, to feel the support, the enjoyment. Sometimes I love hearing if someone didn't like it either, because at least I managed to get some emotion out of the people. And of course, that's why you're going to concerts, to feel something, to be moved, and to experience something which is only in time. You cannot capture a concert. It's a timely art, which is, that's why we love playing with time so much as well, because it cannot be repeated somehow, unless of course on a CD recording, but that's kind of not the same. And of course you go to the concert to enjoy live music, live people, live company, maybe a glass of wine, but it's just fantastic to have that opportunity to have the communication between the audience and the performer. And if you have the ability to listen and watch what's happening on stage, it can be sometimes very magical. Not always, but it can be amazing if you're able to tune in to the expressions and the affects and the emotions, I think.
And it's something that we will never take for granted. Not that we did before, but we extra won't.
Extra won't, promise.
Yeah. Kinga, thank you so much. You're getting so many comments saying how much they've enjoyed watching you tonight and listening. So we will have to get you back to show us some ornaments, maybe later in the summer. So
thank you so much for having me, and sorry for running out of time.
It's because it's such a good session. Thanks for coming, everyone, and look forward to seeing you soon. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.